Hey, Jennifer.
Hey, Monica.
Once again, we have an amazing conversation. I'm very excited to share with our listeners. It's full of hope, wonder, a deep appreciation for the natural world, and it really highlights the power of storytelling.
Absolutely. Today we're talking with Amy Martin, the host of Threshold, a Peabody Award-winning podcast that explores our relationship with the natural world.
Each season, Threshold takes listeners deep into one complex environmental story. So, whether it's the return of the American bison, oil drilling in the Arctic, or what it really means to stay below 1.5 degrees of global warming.
Now in its fifth season, Hark, Amy is exploring the fascinating and often overlooked world of non-human sound. We're talking flowers that can hear pollinators, coral larvae that navigate by sound, and even tiny insects with rich acoustic lives.
At the heart of it all, she's asking a powerful question. What happens when one species, namely humans, only listens to itself?
Gosh, that was so powerful. Exactly. This conversation covers so much ground. We talk about noise pollution, ecological grief, and even imagine what life could be like for humans 1,000 years from now.
Amy has a really thoughtful, poetic way of approaching the climate conversation, and she really reminds us both of the urgency and the beauty of the world we're trying to protect.
So, with that, let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Amy Martin. Amy, we are so thrilled to have you on the show. We've been talking about you nonstop the past few weeks. So, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my honor and pleasure.
We would love to hear about Threshold. For those of our listeners that haven't heard about it, can you give us a quick, description of what it is, and then what inspired you to do it? What started it all? Why the Threshold podcast?
I guess I feel like Threshold at its core is about giving time and attention to relationships between humans and all the stuff that we awkwardly group under the title the natural world,
Mm,
which I always have to kind of make this point of, just calling attention to the fact that we have this word for everything that's not us. And that in itself, I feel like kind of makes the case for why I'm making the show, because it points to our inherent self-centeredness, and I'm including myself, all of us, as it's human nature that we're very, very interested in ourselves and each other. And that's a good thing. It's a natural thing. But some of our most important and sustaining and, crucial relationships are with places, with non-human animals, with plants, with minerals and rocks and water and air and atmosphere. And, the list goes on and on. And it is just kind of comical that we're like, all of that has this word, the natural world.
yeah, so true.
And I just wanted to make a show where the intention is to give some time and space to think about that and to really think about it with depth. I'm From the beginning, I've been anxious to, or I guess eager to try to find in myself and find in the people I speak with and with listeners room to think beyond simple categories, to disrupt, in-group, out-group kind of narratives, to really take it as a fact that all of us creatures, including humans, we need all this stuff outside of ourselves. We're all connected by it, and we don't need to approach these issues. It's really tragic to approach these issues in Democrat versus Republican, environmentalist versus industry, all these boxes we put ourselves in, when actually we're just animals trying to survive on this earth together, and we need each other and we need our places and everything around us. And so yeah, I'm, small ambitions.
Tiny, very, very
We like
small.
we
Yeah,
like these just small ideas. It's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
And so
Well,
what were you doing before? Because you've had deep, deep experience working for public radio and beyond. So why the natural world? I understand. I mean, we obviously completely understand it. I think the biggest thing that we always want people to take away is we're part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
And all we do is other. We other everything, but then we're also othering the natural world and everything that's in it. But how did you, because you are into the fifth season. So why did you choose the first couple ones? Because you've really gone in and done themes, which I think is actually a really cool way to do a season. Tell me how that sort of came about and why you chose the topics that you've done.
Really wanted to go deeply into different things. I had been so I learned audio and radio production and everything in college, and then I had a whole career as a musician for a while. And then when I was coming back into journalism and audio storytelling, I did some, freelance stuff for Montana Public Radio where I live, and I live there and in Sweden right now. And I also for National Public Radio, and I love public media. I love public radio, and I'm so grateful for those opportunities. And also it sparked this hunger of like, I want to tell a longer story than fits into All Things Considered. A long
Sure.
story on one of those shows is 4 to 4.5 minutes. That's
Hmm.
long.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be really free to dig in deeply. And as I was feeling that, it was right around the time that Serial, had its first season and
Hmm.
blowing everyone's mind about what you can do with podcasting. And I just was like, why can't we have this kind of serialized
Hmm.
form thing about something other than true crime?
Yeah. And today, here we are,
Yeah.
still true crime
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like murders are the number one
Yeah. Yeah.
genre.
Yeah. 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 And I mean, I get it. It's like an endlessly fascinating thing,
It
right?
is.
Why Law and Order was on for so long.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But there are so many, I mean, if we wanna talk about murders and crimes, I mean, my god, there's an endless supply happening in the natural world, but also there's so much to celebrate. There's so much beauty and wonder happening at the same time, and I feel like we need to both feel that pain of the loss and the inspiration of the connections that are still very much available and feeding people every day, literally and figuratively. So yeah, I started with bison. I was in Montana. They were, it's an issue that I've been paying attention to just as a citizen for many years there. There's, the largest free roaming herd of wild bison in the world is in Montana in Yellowstone National Park. And yet there's a lot of complexity and controversy about what do you do with a huge mammal that wants to wander and roam by definition and wants to leave the park and then bumps into all kinds of different situations and people trying to make a living where that doesn't necessarily work that well. And yeah, and then I just kind of went from there. Just honestly been following whatever's like sparks me and makes me feels like I could work on this for years and not get bored.
I love it.
It takes a while to get a season out, so I have to be able to stay engaged.
And Amy, your storytelling is very melodic to me. So when I listen to you tell these stories, it's not just the music that you interlay, but it's the way you break down the stories of how you get to that episode is really beautiful. It
Hmm.
Thank
sounds so
you.
inviting and it's very thoughtful. So I know Monica, Katrina, and myself all appreciate your love affair and your love and passion for the natural world because you share it in such a beautiful way that really resonates so deeply with all of us. And it
Oh,
feels good because you're like, oh, I'm learning something, but I'm also like discovering like a why I like this thing or why
Hmm.
it matters. So it's beautifully done. Really
Well,
beautifully
and
done.
your voice is so great. And so when you
Yes,
first started talking, I was kind of like,
that's her.
that's Amy. It is. It's
Thank
it's
you.
that is such a helpful aspect of listening to an audio storytelling. You have to be brought in by the voice and the tone and everything. I think about, environmental stories, and I think I really, just coupling on the point that the beauty of what you're doing, and I do kind of like the what you're saying is like there is the horror, the murder, the mystery of what's happening. And so if you can create a compelling story for that, then you do get the listener in. And it reminded me of probably the most compelling environmental. And again, I'm not like, I haven't listened to all the podcasts, but Drilled, I don't know, was really phenomenal. Some of the early ones that told the story of the coal and gas and oil industry. And they made it, this compelling sort of mystery of how we got here. And I just think you're doing the same thing by giving the background and not just letting it be this like sad, depressing.
Yeah, I mean, I think connecting up with history is
Mm-hmm.
really important, and I didn't even really think about that. It wasn't until maybe after my second season came out that somebody said, "Oh, this is an environmental history podcast," and I was like, "Oh, is it? Okay."
Hmm.
Um, I mean, in addition to other things, but there's something to that, I think, just in the sense of, especially environmental stories, they play out over these huge timescales, and it's really easy to only think of stories as things that happen within our lifespan. I mean, that feels long to us, 80, 100 years. That's not how the earth keeps time or tells stories. And so being able to find those ways to draw the threads and help people and help myself understand how we got to where we are, I think makes it more interesting, and is also just crucial for figuring out how to proceed, to understand that there is something that got us here. It didn't just like happen.
Hmm.
Right. And you provide that context. And I think, history, everybody always says, if you don't understand history, we're just going to repeat it. But you've dealt with some really like high stakes topics, drilling in the Arctic. I think the time one that talked about 1.5 climate, which I think was back in 2022. You know, and now the new one, Hark, which is all about really sound. And I think you said something earlier that, we're very self-interested. And again, our today, if you're in a big city, all you're hearing are man-made sounds. So talk about how you moved from, I don't want to say like harder to softer, but it's a little bit more lyrical. Everything has some hope in it, but just a really beautiful season. So tell us about Hark and how you got there after the other 4 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I think it is exactly what you were just pointing to, in the sense that I really wanted to make a season where humans were not at the center. And of course, every episode has people in it, lots of people. And there's a few more episodes to come. And it gets, the human part of the sound story is kind of what we end up ending on in the season, because we're part of all of this in very positive and very destructive ways. But I kind of wanted to challenge myself and listeners to be like, can we hang with stories where we're not the main character? Not just for like part of an episode or a couple episodes, but for like a whole big long season. Can we turn our attention to other voices? I mean, in some ways, I think the most marginalized voices on the planet are non-human voices. We
Hmm.
talk a lot, and we should talk a lot about marginalized voices within human societies. That's incredibly important. There's an absolute parallel with the way that we marginalize, ignore, talk over, don't even recognize the existence of the voices of so many other forms of life. Their voices actually matter. They really matter. They're part of what we were born into. They're part of how the earth sustains itself. They're valuable in their own right, just the way that mine, your voices are valuable in our own right. And there's also incredible joy and surprise and hilarity and beauty, and sometimes just weirdness in their voices that I just find really delightful. And I wanted to center. I wanted to explore very like, just give myself all the permission to just go deeper, go like, yeah, corals are listening, fish are making weird sounds. And then of course there's the charismatic megafauna that we all know about, with elephants and dolphins. But yeah, I think in some ways this season has been, well, I don't just think, I know that it has been in me from the very beginning. I actually thought about trying to write a book about this before I started Threshold. And I was working on a book proposal, and then I was like, this isn't a book. This needs to be done in sound. So it kind of just felt like I was ready after, and maybe especially after doing Time to 1.5, which was very, very meaningful to me and also very intense. And I was just ready to be like, I want to listen to something other than people shouting about lack of climate action. As important as that is.
Yes. Well, Amy, this season specifically around sound really hit home for me personally, because I think about and I talk about noise versus sound all the time, and just those impacts of how noise really impacts us. And I was thinking about you, I guess it was like maybe 2 weeks ago, because I live at the beach in the summertime, and I was at my place where I live, and I'm 2 blocks off the ocean, and every morning before the sun comes up, I can hear the boats. I find it fascinating that the boats are so loud and that I can hear it 2 blocks in, and the boats are a quarter mile and further out, but it's that sound, that deliberate sound of the motors, and then when I jump in the ocean in the early morning when there's really, really quiet, the only thing I can hear usually is the sound of these very loud, fishing boats that are going out with all these 100 people on board that are going to fish for the day. I just think how noisy we are to all the creatures, and that we don't even think about what we're doing, the destruction in our waters to the creatures that need the quiet and the silence, and that we're just these loud, loud creatures that are mucking everything up without even acknowledging or being aware of it. So I was thinking about you just 2 weeks ago when I was listening to your episodes, thinking, oh my gosh, this is ringing home so true to me, because we are, until you actually listen, right? It's so hard to listen these days because everything's so loud and noisy. But when you do listen, that's when you start learning so, so much, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting, and you're so right about water in particular. I mean, sound is important to things that live everywhere, earth, wind,
Yeah.
sky sky and water, but in the water in particular, I mean, sound travels 4 times as fast. It doesn't lose its energy, so it goes and goes and goes. And so there's a reason why you're hearing those ships, long you can put your head under the water and hear them long after you're not able to see them.
Mhm.
And we're terrestrial animals, so animals that are living in the water, that are conditioned to be able to hear and need to be able to hear in order to survive, they are really, really impacted, and there are important things to pay attention to about, one of the things that people will hear in a future episode is relationships with beluga whales. Beluga whale mothers and calves, they live almost entirely in darkness in the Arctic, and they really, really depend on sound, like almost all the cetaceans do. But particularly belugas, because they live in a place that's dark for so much of the year. And the moms and babies are calling back and forth to each other all the time, all the time, all the time. And you interrupt that sound, and it's basically like taking a mother and child in the middle of a city and putting blindfolds on them and saying, good luck finding each other. It's deadly. And that's just one of many ways that we are so intrusive and kind of just rude.
Yes.
But the good thing is with noise pollution, unlike almost all other forms of pollution, once you turn it off, it's gone. You know? It's not like there's a loud car going by as I say this. Uh, but,
Cue the loud car.
yeah, exactly. Right when we needed it. I'm sure it'll be back. It is really kind of amazing to think about though, I mean, we talk about, like, with DDT that got into
Mm.
the environment,
Mhm.
it was a long process of it once we stopped distributing it so widely for it to work its way through the whole ecosystem, and many, many impacts persisted for a long time. With noise pollution, if we turn it down, it makes a huge impact, and if we turn it off, it's
Mhm.
just gone, and everything can start to recover and hear each other immediately. And I think that's a really hopeful thing to keep in mind, that these are solvable problems. We don't have to be the rude jerks at the party. We can learn how to quiet down.
Well, where we live, geothermal has been mandated in most areas. And so it's like a HVAC system that's basically through the earth. It's heated and cooled through the earth. So you don't have the big compressors that we're all used to outside our windows or on top of all these buildings. And you don't notice why, but you're just like, mentally and physically, you just feel better when you don't have that constant droning
That's
going
right.
on. And sometimes it's those things that we're not even sure what's happening, but when we notice it, like we had a friend here this weekend, and separate from noise, but he was like, "Oh my god, you have so many butterflies in your backyard." I was like, "I do?" He's like, "Yeah. I mean, we're in Charlotte in a suburb, but I just don't really see them." So that's a different pollution question of, I'm like, does everybody have lawns? Is everybody spraying their lawns? Well, they're probably killing all the butterflies, but we don't notice something's gone, missing, whether that's a sound or a butterfly, until, we're in another context. We have to be pulled out of our context Tell us a little bit more about underwater, because one of the data points that really was shocking to me is that global shipping noise is doubling every 10 or 11 years. That was wild. Is that just we're doing more of it? Is it getting louder? Is it heavier ships? I mean, all this Amazon stuff we're transporting everywhere. What's going on?
I think it's all of the above. I mean, the number of ships that we are sending around the world, and yeah, it is all the stuff we're ordering. There's a cost to getting that thing next day,
Hmm.
and it's it is really dangerous. It's really dangerous for especially when we think about, marine life, not just marine mammals, but all marine life, because at the same
Hmm.
time, they're dealing with the incredible heat that we're putting into the oceans, and so they're already stressed, and it's a big stress increaser, even if there are all kinds of really scary, huge sounds that are, explosive sounds of seismic testing and military testing and other kinds of things that can actually cause animals to go deaf, that can cause them to become so scared that they race to the surface and die. In that way, but it is in some ways those big dramatic events are terrible, but kind of like what you were saying about the compressors, the constant drone, the
Hmm.
fact that so many animals have to spend so much energy calling louder nonstop to try to find each other, to send out their little sonar pulses to find the food. Um, it evokes all the kinds of things that happen to us when we get stressed. I mean, they talk about, rising cortisol levels and also increased metabolic rate. And so they're both hungrier, needing more energy, and it's harder work to get the food they need.
Hmm.
And I guess I do think it is worth mentioning, as we're talking about these non-human creatures, that the noise has very demonstrable impacts on our health too.
Yes.
There are increasing, studies showing links with cardiovascular diseases, with type 2 diabetes. There's growing evidence about links with dementia. And of course, none of these things, these are epidemiological studies that, we can't say like noise causes stroke, it's not like that, but it can increase your risk factor. And
Hmm.
that's a risk that none of us want. We don't want that factor to go up for any reason. And so you're right when you're talking about the difference of living in a place where you're not hearing that constant drone, and how you're something and you relaxes more, and that has an impact on our
Yeah.
long-term health.
Hmm.
Actually, Monica,
Okay.
can I tell you something really quickly?
Yeah.
Because of Monica, because I've been to Serenbe quite a few times, many times. And the geothermal air conditioning and heating, when I'm somewhere where I can hear an air conditioner, I always go back to thank you to Sarah and B and Monica and Katrina, because I learned so much about geothermal because of them. And being at Sarah and B, thinking about how quiet it is, and then going somewhere where air conditioners are constantly on and you can't unhear it. So
Hmm.
once you learn how nice it is to find that resonant space of quiet and stillness within you in any space you're in, and then for that to be disrupted, you're like, oh, that's that agitation, like that you learn that you can't again unsee.
Yeah.
So I had to put that in there while we were talking about the sound and the
Well, and
noise.
it changes your expectations, right? And
Yeah.
so, it's always, we talk about once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And so
Mhm.
sometimes these are difficult or inconvenient truths, right? That we don't want to know. Kind of, don't tell me, because if I know, then I'm going to have to change my behavior, or I'm going to have guilt or shame or whatever these things are. And so when you sort of worked on this season of really listening to the natural world, like, tell me about, like, how did that change you, just learning about all of.
Yeah, I love that question. It still is changing me. I feel constantly amazed at how much I don't know, how much I'm not
Mm.
aware of. I've been spending a lot of time learning about this, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface, really. There's so much that we couldn't fit into the season. There's so much I just didn't have time to research, and people I didn't have time to talk to. So wondrous and delightful to me that there are all these conversations happening around me. And I'm thinking of like tree hoppers, these little tiny insects that live all around the world, and they make these bonkers sounds by vibrating their abdomens against plant stems. And you can be standing right next to it in the open air and you can't hear them. But if you put a contact microphone onto the plant and listen, then you can hear these sounds. And I
Wow.
mean, I grew up in Iowa surrounded by leaf hoppers and tree hoppers, and I was a pretty outdoorsy kid, and of course I didn't know that was all happening. It's just one very small example of the kinds of communication that are happening all around us all the time. And um I can get overwhelmed and sad about all the things we were just talking about. And I feel like one of the ways that this season is helping to change me is just continually not it doesn't cover it up or make it go away or make it better really even, but just matching that the painful parts with these experiences of awe that there even despite all this destruction, there's so much singing and croaking and screeching and calling and all things happening that are there. The world is still singing, and if we can just quiet down enough to listen to it, it's just right there ready for us to take it in. And I think it calms me down. I think it helps me feel more connected. I think it helps me remember in a really, really nourishing way, like how insignificant I am. I really think that's one of the wonderful gifts of listening, and it feels almost like maybe a way of being hard on ourselves or like unnecessarily self-deprecating to be like, "I'm not important," but I actually think it's this enormous relief for so many of us just to understand how small we are in the big picture and how everything I'm saying and everything that I'm hearing from my fellow humans, it can feel like the only thing. Like the only story is what's on the front page of the New York Times today, and it's totally overwhelming. But there are other stories and there are other voices and other narratives playing out, and those are very, very important to those creatures too. And paying attention to that, I think, just kind of helps put my little life and these little stories into a greater perspective that is helpful to me.
Mhm,
That
mhm.
kind of goes back to what I think you mentioned, where you said somewhere about, is it ecological grief? I think you really beautifully talked about ecological grief, because what you're saying right now also kind of goes into, was it stubborn optimism? I think you
Mhm.
mentioned something like that. Can you dive into that a little bit as well?
Yeah, sure. I actually think I need to give credit for both of those terms to 2 different people. The ecological grief, well, I think it's a term that has been used by many people, but I was really talking about that in a conversation with my sister, who's
Mm,
a therapist, a climate aware therapist who's really has a important role to play right now with the Climate Psychology Association of North America, where they're really working on ecological grief and climate grief just as a major part of the mental health reality of many, many people in the world.
Mhm.
And stubborn optimism is a term that I believe was coined by Christiana Figueres, who was the person who was kind of one of the main shepherds of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Mhm.
mhm,
Just an amazing human. In fact, I think her podcast is called Stubborn Optimism, and I think both of those terms and those concepts are really important right now, because I think if we try to skip over the grief part and pretend we can make it all go away, we're burying our heads in the sand. We're going to make ourselves crazy because it's not reality. Like there
mm,
is a lot to grieve right but I also think the stubborn optimism is crucial, and I love the stubbornness in front of it that,
Mhm.
Rebecca Solnit, I think, said,
Mm.
"Hope is" what did she say? Hope is a hatchet we break down doors with," or something like that. Like, you thinking of it as a choice, thinking of it
Mhm.
as a decision to take up an attitude of, "I am going to get through this, we are going to get through this."
Mm.
And especially those of us with all kinds of different privileges, if we have enough to eat, if we have a safe roof over our heads, no excuses, basically. Like,
Mhm.
be sad, feel the sad, and then get to work. And I think the pairing of those two terms, ecological grief and stubborn optimism, that's what it gives to me.
mm,
Not beat yourself up for getting knocked down by the sadness, but then don't let yourself stay there. Like, pull yourself
sure.
up and get to work. You have to.
Yeah.
I have to. It's me
Yeah.
talking,
Yeah.
to be clear.
She had, there's a TED video that Katrina found for us that talked about the stubborn optimism that I watched as well. I believe Christiana said, "We are the farmers of the future," metaphorically, right?
Yeah.
That, we have to catalyze and change. And I thought it was interesting because we talk a lot about it on here is that, faced with everything that's going on and, even just that climate isn't even it's a topic, but sort of erasing it in America, it's just a very weird time right now. And so we can be indifferent, and if it's not affecting you, you don't think it's affecting you. Like we're under like in Atlanta, like a crazy, probably all the whole Southeast, crazy heat advisory with the heat index. It's going to be something like 106 or something for the next couple days. I know.
Terrible.
And so I'm sitting here in a conditioned room, will I even know that it's going on? That's huge space of privilege. So you can be indifferent and do nothing. You can despair and just hide. I always joke, like, I'm just going to turn Netflix on and just pretend nothing else is happening. But then, or we can be stubborn optimists. So I did really love that concept. And I do think what you're doing is that. And I don't know if it was a preview. I don't think it was a preview for this. I think it was maybe a preview for Time to 1.5. And if you even remember when you did your preview, but you talked about what if, like, envision the future that we're done, that we've succeeded, that we've made it. We're on the other end of it and we solved climate change. And don't worry how we did it, but I just want you to sit in it and feel that psychological relief. I've never heard anybody talk about it that way. And I know it's sort of silly. It was a preview, but it was a really wonderful way to start off and sort of say, come with me on this journey. And it's not like it's going to be okay, but it just was a wonderful way because we never let ourselves we sit in hope, but to sit in this, we did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so now don't we want to feel that
It's
way all the
beautiful.
time? How do we get there? So I don't know. It was a really lovely, it's funny, like
I agree.
your preview was fabulous. It
I did
really
too. I
set the
remember that.
tone. It set the tone. And I just don't hear people
Yeah.
speaking that way. And so I guess thank you for that. It was a beautiful way to sort of give, it was a gift.
Well, thank you for that reflection and reminding me of it. I think that came out of a very clear feeling of we don't know how to envision the end of this story other than apocalypse. And I can get it into apocalyptic narratives as much or more than the average person. I tried to
Mhm.
write an apocalyptic novel for a
Novel.
while. I mean, there is something really compelling about that.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to diss on that or extricate it from myself or from the world in any way, but when we're facing what we're facing here and the level of threat that actually exists, I think it's crucial that we tap into a wider range of our creativity. And we have to find some place to imagine endings other than
Mhm.
2.5, 3 degrees, 5 degrees of warming, which is just truly apocalypse for our species and for many, many, many other forms of life. I just feel like I'm not going to run for office. I'm not going to lead a giant corporation. I tell stories, and so I feel like that is all I can do is like, can we create a story even if we don't know, like you said, how we got there, even we can't, even if it feels like, oh, that's so Pollyannish, like I can't, but like, can we make a little space in our mind for that
Mhm.
idea and then
Yeah.
start to connect the dots of like, how could we get there? Because if we
Mhm.
can't even imagine that as a possibility, we for sure aren't going to get there.
Well, you do it in such a beautiful way, Amy, because Monica and I have talked before about a lot of people just plan for like the next year or the next 5 years, or they just can only see in this kind of 10-year frame or what have you. But you really kind of take us down the road. Like, what does it look like 1,000 years from now? Or where can we be if we kind of lead in the space of your head space and to kind of give us the ability to look that way and look that far ahead, and we're there and we're in it.
Mhm.
And how
Mhm.
beautiful can it be if we envision it for ourselves instead of looking at such a small little lens of 5 years, 10 years out? But what would the world look like if we could make it something as beautiful as we want it to be?
Well, and talk about that because you did a Substack post that was a
Hmm.
letter to Earth or Earthlings 1,000 years from now. Talk
Hmm.
about that because I thought there was some really interesting details in there. But share why you wanted to do that and how, and actually curious like what the reaction has been.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I was gone all last week, and so I haven't looked at my Substack.
Good for you. See, that's even better. Sometimes you're like, I just got to put it out there and
Yes. And walk away.
having to follow up. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, I was out taking my nephew on his first backpacking trip, which was awesome.
Oh,
But
amazing.
I'm just kind of getting back into the world of devices. Yeah, so my Substack in general is called Letters to Earthlings, and I have this, I don't know, series-ish thing in mind, very loosely defined in my mind. I've only done 2 posts like this where I am writing actual letters to Earthlings of different times. The Substack as a whole is not, or not every single one of them is an actual letter, but I thought it'd just be fun every once in a while to write it in actual letter form. And I do love trying to envision other times and other versions of society and of individuals. I think it's really important for me to, again, to kind of place our current moment and our current stories in this broader frame, just to remember that, I mean, can any of us name exactly who the president was 150 years ago? I mean, I could look it up, I could guess, but like some of the most important people in the world are so quickly forgotten. But these relationships and these processes that sustain us, they are not. They continue. And that's kind of what this idea of writing these letters is about, of like kind of connecting with future humans and how they're relating to the world around them, just as we are now. In that one in particular, I was, to be honest, I think needing a little bit of an escape from 2025. It's quite the year.
Yep.
Especially for Americans.
Yes. Probably good you were gone last week.
Yeah.
I go away again this week.
Yeah. I think that was partly it. And also, I think also I'm continually intrigued by the notion of interstellar travel and setting up colonies on other planets. I'm intrigued on multiple levels. Partly, I've always been kind of a space nerd who, like, thinks it'd be super cool to get to go do some of that myself, and I can get very interested and excited and all that. It's an amazing thing. And at the same time, I guess the older I get and the more in love with this planet I am, and the more aware I am of how little we know actually about our own planet, especially our oceans, I feel more and more like, I think I want to stay right here. And I'm just, what I was trying to do in that particular letter you were talking about was just imagining what it was like if we were in a society where it was easy to take like a business trip, like let's say you've gone for a month to Mars or wherever, and you're coming back to Earth. And every moment, from the moment you step onto the ship that takes you to wherever you go, and wherever it is, no matter how fancy of a kind of, false ecosystem we create, your entire existence is a replica of what we have here freely given to us. Inside the ship, as you're walking from the ship to your space pod, as you're moving around your life, every single bit of it is like the technicians are trying to recreate a mini Earth for you with the right amount of oxygen and nitrogen in the air, with the right kind of water, with the right kind of food. And it's amazing thinking about where we're moving in this direction. And all the energy we're going to take to be like, how can we create an Earth? How can we create an Earth inside a helmet or inside a pod? And it's like,
what if there was a place, such a place?
And what if we thought of it like that? I mean, really thought of it. That's like, this is our pod. This is our little pod, and we're in this huge, cold, brutal space. And if we held it with that level of preciousness of like, oh my gosh, like, well, of course, if you're on Mars in your little, Earth pod, you're not going to just put a bunch of junk into the air because it could kill you. And it's like,
God, that's a great analogy comparison. That's great.
Maybe we should not do that here.
Yes. No, but it's true. Like, pretend you're in your Earth pod on Mars. Like, are you going to be smoking in your, I'm using that as an example, but like putting smoke into your atmosphere?
Are you going to set up a factory that's just going to be off-gassing
spewing.
into
Yeah,
your
yeah.
habitat,
And
that would
turning
be
the water
insanity.
dirty, that's a limited resource, right? Because that's it, right? Like, we have no sense of water. It just I mean, it just comes out of the tap.
Right.
Again,
Yeah.
privileged position, but, like, turn on the lights, ACs, and we take it all for granted, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think that really gets to the heart of a lot of what we're struggling with as a species right now is we're coming up
Mhm,
against limits.
Yeah.
mhm,
And, as every parent knows or anybody who's ever loved a kid and watched a kid grow knows, like there is that time when you bump up against limits and it hurts and it's frustrating
mhm.
and you want them to go away.
Never.
Yeah.
That's where the growth happens, It's
Yeah.
when the kids hit the limits, that's where the growth happens, or it doesn't. If they're never
Mhm.
limits never hold, and if everybody just waves them away, then we have infantile adults, some of whom might be running the world right now.
Yeah. Check. Yeah.
But I think there's real power in that, of, like, recognizing, like, we are bumping up against limits as a
Mhm.
species, and we have choices then of what we're gonna do. Are we gonna grow with that? Or are we just gonna keep banging our fists against it, hoping it goes away? Because it's not.
Yeah, I know. But with that, I think it's all about education. So Monica and I always want to have people that really help us see and listen and learn in ways we might not have before. And your work is really that storytelling, that interplay of us being all in it, like we're all one. When one part of the world hurts, the rest of the part of the world hurts. We're all interconnected. So your storytelling, the stories you choose to tell are really, really important, and especially now more than ever. So I know we're very thankful for your stories and that you're sharing them with the world because, again, it's about education, it's about hope, about love and empathy and kindness to
Mhm.
each other
Mhm.
and giving ourselves grace to go through this together and, walk through it together. And how do we kind of not beat ourselves up, but like, how do we hold hands and figure out ways in our own local communities or beyond to make a difference? So I
Yeah.
appreciate you, Amy. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this thoughtful and very affirming conversation.
We're here with you. No, I mean, and I think, storytelling is the way out. I think, or one way out. I think we
Mhm.
have to engage people, compel them to have a conversation, but in a warm, positive way. We can't force people to be sit down and, shove this stuff at them. We really have to make it entertaining and palatable. And what else is it that we haven't I'm sure there's a zillion things we haven't talked about, but, like, what else would you like to share with us? We'll definitely wanna share the podcast and the Substack. Anything else you're working on you wanna give us a little behind the curtain peek?
Well, I can tell you that we will have another season of the show, and it's going to be the first season in which I am not the host. We're going to have a
Oh,
Okay.
totally different person, and she's wonderful. Not totally sure when that's coming out. Most likely, it's like second quarter of 2026,
Okay.
but we shall see. So that's in process. And we're also cooking up kind of like a sister version of Threshold that is, we call Threshold Conversations, which is more of
Mhm.
an interview show.
Yep.
So we did some episodes of that during the pandemic and kind of set it aside for a while. And we're kind of re-envisioning it now, a little shorter form, a little bit more thematically organized, but hoping to start releasing those in early 2026. So
Great. Busy.
yeah, kind of a lot happening,
Yeah,
but
that's
good stuff.
great. Well, everybody needs to listen. They're all amazing. Start at the beginning, start at the end. Just listen to the
just
previews and
start.
see which one you wanna get into. But we love it, and we're thrilled to have met you, discovered you, and just excited to share your great work.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for all the work you're doing as well. I've been enjoying listening to some of your episodes too, so it's a real honor to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Amy.
you.
Wow. Jen, that was such a wonderful and beautiful conversation. I could have talked to Amy for hours. What was your biggest takeaway or aha moment?
Okay, I totally agree. Same here. I think my biggest takeaway was allowing myself to just sit, just kind of in that moment with the possibility that we do prevent the worst climate outcomes, that we do shift our values and mindsets, and that we end up living in a world that's more biophilic and more interconnected. That vision is so grounding for me, and it really gives real clarity around what we're actually working towards, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I really liked that. It was very impactful for me, and one thing we didn't have time to get into, but I think is really important is the idea that Amy writes in her Substack, ecological thinking. We talk about it in a lot of different ways, but at its core, it's about shifting our perspective and recognizing that while humans, our needs do matter, and so do the needs of the planet and the animals and the systems around us. And so I think we have to think less selfishly. And that kind of thinking exists in so many cultures around the world, but it's something we've largely lost touch with in the United States. We'll definitely link the essay in the show notes. It's a powerful read. And Amy also talks about extending ecological thinking beyond environmental topics. Like, what if we thought about schools as ecosystems, or our homes as an ecosystems, or our communities as ecosystems? We've talked in the past, Jen, about siloed thinking. I think
Hmm.
this is sort of an expansion of that concept. How do we think broader and beyond ourselves?
I know that's so true. And one more thing I really want to highlight is our conversation about noise pollution. Some of the facts were hard to hear, but I find it and found it oddly hopeful because this is actually a solvable problem. When you reduce the noise, things begin to heal. It's a good reminder that not every environmental issue is out of our hands. Some things really can change and rather quickly.
Absolutely. And so, if you love this conversation, we cannot recommend Threshold enough. It's insightful, beautifully produced, and truly one of the best podcasts out there.
Absolutely agree once again. So we'll drop links to everything we mentioned in the show notes, Amy's Substack, Threshold, and more if you want to dig deeper.
All right, Jen, talk soon.
Bye, Monica.